Welcome into the Sunday Side Sessions. I am Mike Schaefer, joined by Wilson Moore of the Omaha World Herald. We are going to be breaking down Nebraska's win over Maryland on Saturday. The Huskers came back for the first time in a long time, as Nebraska has not had a come from behind win since 2017, late October 2017. What did you have going on, Wilson, in 2017? Do you know where you were in October of 2017? Were you
October.
rolling around somewhere in Columbia, Missouri at that point?
I was not even in Columbia, Missouri yet. In October of 2017, I was a senior in high school
All
in
right, look at
Minnetonka,
that.
Minnesota.
There we
Um,
go.
yeah, pretty good time at that point. I wish I had more details of what exactly I was doing, but I was just beginning my senior year of high school.
That is amazing. So Nebraska had not had a win in which it trailed an opponent, had to drive down the field, finish with a go-ahead score, since Tanner Lee found Stanley Morgan at the end of October against Purdue, and Wilson Moore was still in high school. That tells you how long and how bad this stretch of football has been for Nebraska. How bad they've been in the fourth quarter, by the way, as a team. Winning those types of situations, which you would think you would just kind of fall into. Like Nebraska's allowed that to happen from various walk-on quarterbacks in that stretch, from other players in that stretch, and they had not done it themselves. So it was a kind of a you know, redefining night for Nebraska football after what has been such a bad decade of football. So I do appreciate the fact that you were a senior in high school, because that adds even more to this idea that it has been a long time since we saw what Dylan Raiola and Dane Key were able to accomplish there on the final play of the drive, everything that went into it. But we will get to the end in a little bit. I want to start with some logistical stuff, because like me, you're normally on a Saturday in a press box watching a game, and the Maryland trip provides some difficulties in terms of overall travel, and businesses have to make decisions. And then you also had Nebraska basketball stuff going on at the end of the week as well, which is more than likely why you were not necessarily in College Park. What was the experience like watching this one just on television and enjoying BTN's probably F-list broadcast crew on that one?
It was a little strange just because, I realized as the game kicked off, like, this is the first, these are the first snaps I haven't seen directly in front of me this season.
Yeah.
I don't always complain when I'm on my couch wearing sweatpants. I think life gets a lot worse than that, especially, like you said, yeah, the past couple days, I didn't get back from Chicago for Big Ten Media Days until Thursday night, so I was happy to take a breath. Did have some stuff to write basketball wise that morning, so I'm not complaining too much. But yeah, it's a different perspective. Like I said, first time hadn't seen them in person this year. It's interesting seeing what other people have to say. I think you get more of like that national perspective because you don't get that when you're in the press box. It's only what's directly in front of you.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. One of the things that I don't know that I appreciated, and I knew a handful of people that were at the game, I didn't know how much Nebraska representation was actually there in College Park until after the game. The videos start coming out of the players going back onto the field, celebrating with Nebraska's fans and all of that. That is I've been there once. And sleepy is the politest way to describe the environment that you can find for Maryland football right now. And in 2019, it was pretty much fully asleep at that point in time. It seemed a little bit better. They have an interesting team. I'll stop short on providing too much over the top enthusiasm for Maryland football, but Malik Washington might end up being the best quarterback Nebraska plays all year. I left pretty impressed by him. What were your initial thoughts on this game kind of coming into it, and then what kind of stood out to you the most at the end of this one after Nebraska kneels down, gets their fifth win to go 5-1?
Well, coming in, I'll be honest, my main thought was I don't know that this Nebraska team is ready to play a road game with just the way they played against Michigan State. And Michigan State, we knew last week, and I think that was reaffirmed this week when they lost to UCLA, is not a good team. And I thought Nebraska kind of played down to their level. And just going in, I was thinking, is this team going to win on the road? Because it's regardless of who you're playing, Big Ten conference road wins don't grow on trees. And you got to, you don't stumble into one, you got to take it. And I didn't know that Nebraska was in a position to do that just based on their performance the week before. And then, sorry, Mike, what was the next part of your question?
Oh yeah, no, go ahead, keep going.
No,
I mean,
I said, well,
I basically like, and then how did it sort of look to you? I mean, as the whole thing unfolded, like you kind of mentioned you were concerned that or thought that Nebraska was going to have some struggles just going on the road and playing. They come out like they did against Michigan State, start early, score early. And I think they only scored 7 points in the first quarter, but they had opportunities for more. Put up 17 more in the second quarter, give up 17. But then they kind of hit that middle of the game lull, just like they did against Michigan State.
yeah, I guess takeaways from a big picture perspective, it's this team is still flawed, but deserves a ton of credit for winning the kind of game that we've seen them lose a lot. I mean, I've only been here 3 years, and I've seen them lose that particular kind of game quite a few times. This is a wildly entertaining team. Whether or not that's a good thing or not, I think your mileage will vary. I think this game kind of showed exactly what Nebraska is, what their flaws are and what their strengths are. And they're going to be dealing with both of those for the rest of the season.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I am sort of amazed at how similar yet very different the last 2 weeks have been, where Nebraska seems to get off to a fast start. Nebraska closes with a really strong fourth quarter. And then in the middle is just sort of throw your hands up and you wonder how this is the same team on those bookend quarters because they don't look anything like it. And even the second quarter where they scored the 17 points, inside of there, you have just strange like decision making, bad play on the field, maybe some questionable decisions from the coaching on the side. It sort of takes everybody for Nebraska to look like this. And I know there's going to be a lot of focus on Dylan Raiola from yesterday and throughout the week and sort of the conversation about him and everything else, but I mean, it's not like Nebraska's defense was playing particularly well in the second quarter at times. It's not like Matt Rule was pressing all of the right buttons in the second quarter. It's kind of amazing how at one point they're up, 24-10 with the ball at midfield. And you're like, man, they could go down here and score. And Nebraska has the opportunity to just take full control of this game. Very similar to the Michigan State thing. And they just refuse to do it. I don't know if that's like some kind of mental block. Like I sort of out of words to even kind of explain what I think or how Nebraska continues to be in this situation where they can seize a game. They had it against Cincinnati and they just don't do it right now. I'm not sure what that is with this team.
Yeah, I mean, just spitballing, I think part of it is a young quarterback. That happens. And, that's not to put everything on Dylan Raiola, but I think that's certainly part of it, that you have a quarterback who, while he has a full year of starting under his belt, is still coming along in his development, is still learning. This is not a thing that happens overnight. Quarterback development, I think, is one of the more just complicated and varied and long-term things in sports. So I think that's part of it. Also, a shaky offensive line can just spring up at any given moment, as we've seen from Nebraska.
Yeah.
And, a defense that has been prone to the big play as we saw. And I think those are all, I don't think any of those are major revelations, but sometimes it all just kind of coalesces into one disastrous quarter for Nebraska, as we've seen the past 2 weeks.
And sometimes that disastrous quarter somehow managed to start in one half and then continue into the second half as it did again in the third quarter. We jump a lot around on the Sunday side session, but we're going to go all the way back to the beginning. Nebraska's first drive, they're moving the ball down there. They're on the other side of the field. They're in Maryland territory, and they get into that stretch where you just sort of know that it's going to require a decision for Matt Rule, just like we saw against Michigan, just like we've seen in every game this year. Nebraska has had a turnover on downs in the opponent's territory in every single contest this year. And I'm curious from how this game started. Were you surprised they didn't choose to go for a field goal? Did you feel like going for it made sense right there off the bat, especially with what you know happened in the Michigan game or what you've seen play out in other games this year? What were your thoughts just off of that first drive? Nebraska gets it to 4th and 2. The play clock gets down to about 8 seconds before they have anyone kind of on the line of scrimmage ready to go. I think they took the snap at like 3 seconds. And it looked honestly like one of the most uninspired plays run in the entire duration of that game. So what were you kind of thinking going into that? And how do you feel about Nebraska continuing to sort of be aggressive in these situations? That has been part of their DNA this year. We saw it work with the touchdown against Cincinnati with Dane Key, but we've seen it fail more than it's worked so far.
Yeah, and I think with that in mind, I wasn't surprised that they went for it because we've seen this quite a few times, and especially on the first drive, which it's a kind of an eerie pattern of the number of times that the first drive is played out like that, where they're just moving the ball with no issues and it just comes to a grinding halt. And I think, if that's your identity, then keep going, keep playing into it, because those are things that balance out over the course of a season. If that I think the worst thing that could happen would be you get kind of daunted and you stop doing that. Then you've just, you haven't reaped any of the benefits of playing like that. So I think, if you're Nebraska, you trust the process and say, this is what we've decided to do. This is what we're committed to doing, how we want to play. And you keep going with it, because I think if that's, if that's what you're going to do, then you got to stick with it.
What did you think of the play call?
I mean, at its core, you want to get the ball to Emmett Johnson, right? He's the guy who,
especially on a day like he had yesterday, no doubt.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I'm not an offensive coordinator. I can't tell you the blocking scheme or any of the details, but just just in the simplest caveman watching football type terms, just get the ball to 21. That dude seems to know what he's doing.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for Nebraska, getting the ball to 21 is a lot easier between the 20s, and it seems to be the closer you get to the goal line. And certainly when there's a line to gain, this would be like a project for me during the week to just go back through and chart plays where Nebraska has it as a 3rd and short or a 4th and short. For as effective as Emmett Johnson has been, they are clearly not a team that does well in short yardage situations, because we saw it again with that opening drive. We see it with their play calling in the red zone. They're almost a little bit afraid to run the football in the red zone with Emmett Johnson. And it's kind of sad given what he did yesterday that I would have to go look, but I think he maybe had 2 runs inside the 10 yards to go for Nebraska in that game yesterday. And so I'm just fascinated how this all works, like how Dana Holgorsen has to kind of thread this perfect needle of, I've got this offensive line. They're not the worst offensive line, but they're deficient in a couple areas. And then it's 4th and 2, and you're calling what I think remember being kind of an inside run where you have some action with a guy coming in motion. I don't know if that motion was supposed to be on the left side of the center to help pick somebody up from there. I'm not entirely sure on that, but Nebraska just really has some struggles in short yardage. I mean, they did it again in the 3rd quarter. I think it was a 3rd and 1, and nobody just picks up the guy off the edge. Like the fullback was supposed to clear him out. I have the number off of me, but I can't think of the name. Number 48. You have the roster memorized off the top of your head. It's one of the fullbacks who plays H-back. I'd have to look this up. It doesn't matter. Point being, Nebraska just in short yardage, it has not looked great this year. But that those are the few times where it didn't look good for Emmett Johnson. We've talked about a few different things, and we've now 15 minutes in. We should probably spend a little bit of time on the guy who had the biggest impact on the game yesterday, even though he didn't score. Which, I don't know how many people waking up today watched all of that game and realized like Emmett Johnson had over 170 yards rushing, 20 yards receiving, nearly 200 yards of total offense, and he never crossed the end zone line. Like, not once. But he was by far the most impactful player for Nebraska, and that includes Isaiah Hunter, who had a terrific game himself, Dane Key, who played well, Dylan Raiola, who is all over the map in terms of how he played. But they couldn't have won that game without Emmett Johnson. What did you kind of think of that performance? What do you think of his season as a whole? And is this the sort of thing that he could maybe build on here in the early stages of Big Ten play?
Yeah, no question. I think in terms of, looking at his season from that kind of macro perspective is, this is what Emmett Johnson has been waiting for 3-4 years now. And this is what we saw in spurts last year. Nebraska had that kind of awkward 4-man running back rotation last year. And it took until really Dana Holgorsen taking over and really the last 3-4 games of the season that Emmett Johnson really got featured. And this is what we saw from him. He's a complete back. He makes guys miss. He can catch passes out of the backfield, and good for him for taking his opportunity. He entered the season for the first time in his career just the undisputed starting running back, and Nebraska has needed it because I don't think that room has really come together the way Nebraska was expecting it to. I know Matt Rule has said in kind of past weeks that they were maybe expecting a little more someone to emerge as that go-to number 2 guy, whether that be Mekhi Nelson or Quentin Ives or Isaiah Mosey. That hasn't quite happened how you would want it to if you're Nebraska. But throughout all of that, Emmett Johnson has just been, the mainstay, the guy who stays consistent. And yesterday was probably his best game as a college football player. Nebraska needed it on a really weird day where we've discussed the weirdness of yesterday.
Yeah, he had like multiple plays yesterday where I was just unbelievably impressed by his ability to just kind of do it himself, if that makes sense. I want to say it was a screen pass where effectively nobody for Nebraska got a good enough block to move their guy out of the play. And yet, I can't find it. I'm trying to roll through the stats. I don't have the exact number that he got on it. But I felt like he made multiple people miss on his way to this, like, it wasn't like a huge amount of yards. I want to say it was like a 10-yard catch, but he made so many people miss in this regard and set Nebraska up for a more manageable, I want to say, third down that they ended up getting. He did that obviously on his long run. He had the 50-yard run that up along the sidelines where, again, like he made guys miss with juke moves, with a spin. He did like a stop and start on somebody. I mean, he was pulling out every move he had in his arsenal. And it made me wonder, I remember watching his film from high school, but it made me wonder if like that's kind of what it looked like on the sidelines. Like, one, maybe he's running away from more people in high school football up in Minneapolis, but two, if he's not just straight running away from them, he's probably just got like bodies flying everywhere trying to grab them as he's juking these guys, spinning people, making moves off them. He ran through contact, I thought, better yesterday than really what we've seen from him all season. Just a tremendous performance, and he did a lot of it kind of not on his own, but largely on his own. I mean, the blocking wasn't always set up for him, and he still was able to make things happen. And then he did a really good job of when there was the opportunity to get outside and then run. And his speed was a difference in a big part of yesterday. I mean, he had a couple just nice 12-yard runs where they were able to move the chains just because he bounced something immediately to the outside, beat him to the corner, and got to the sidelines for the first down.
Yeah, absolutely. He was they lose that game with Emmett Johnson. That's controversial to say, in a day where, like I said, Raiola was all over the place. just the offense was inconsistent in general. He was the guy that was just there every time. That was huge.
Yeah, let's talk about Dylan Raiola. 4 touchdowns, 260 yards, 3 interceptions, a 5th touchdown if you're a cynical person, much like I am, with the pick 6 in there. Do you have any? They never really showed a like pulled out view of it because you're getting BTN broadcast standards and they just aren't very good at what they do. Do you have any idea what he was trying to do on that second interception? Did he say in post game? I guess I didn't notice if he did. But the one where he sort of like jump throws it and it looks like he's trying to throw it out of bounds, but it like never really is that close to getting out of bounds. It just sort of is just right there along the sidelines, an easy interception for the Maryland guy. Was there any explanation or did you see anything there as to what he was actually trying to do?
I haven't caught up on any of the post-game stuff that my colleagues wrote yesterday, so I don't know. That's the one where he got hurt, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
He got hit in the knee, and I think that did affect him for a little while in that game, too.
Yeah. Yeah, like that was a kind of ugly looking hit that he took, not even the one that like after the play. That was pretty standard, but like that.
Yeah, that was Dylan doing a nice job falling down to get a flag, in my opinion. But
yeah, I don't know if he's trying to throw it away. It's just a strange play in a strange sequence of events.
Yeah. It didn't make a ton of sense to me, kind of what he was doing there or what they had happening in that play. And then the other interceptions, I mean, the pick 6, I think, was just a wrong route from Cortez Mills or miscommunication as to where he was going to be on that one. The first interception, I think, was just a bad read by Dylan. Honestly, it's one of those where usually I'm pretty good at remembering these things like as they look, as we're sitting here talking about it. And I honestly, it's so uncharacteristic to see 3 from him. I can't even remember what the first one looks like now. I think the defensive back just saw him, his eyes were pretty much locked on the receiver and he just jumped the route. Like I think that's what that one was, but just not a great day in that regard, but he still goes 20 for 29, still has 260 yards, some of which is Isaiah Hunter on a screen pass is apparently a cheat code in college football now. But, at the end of that game, Nebraska needs a drive. Did you think he had that in him to take them, they go 85 yards, 80 yards down there to go score at the end of that game? Did you feel like Dylan Raiola was going to do that based on everything you had seen leading to that moment?
Yes, because I thought it was a weird enough game that just seemed like the appropriate ending. Like I kind of felt like this can't end normally, like they're gonna get down into the goal line, and whether they score or not, there's gonna be some sort of weirdness. And there was that the drive that Heinrich Harburg had a catch?
I'm glad you brought that up. I still am marveling.
The greatest moment of Heinrich Harburg's tight end career.
No question.
At this point.
No question.
It's just it got weird, and I was expecting it to get weird, and that was just maybe the best drive of Raiola's college career. I'm throwing out superlatives all over the place, but
I like it. This is what we do on this show. We throw caution into the wind, and we just say whatever we want.
On the road, you're banged up from earlier in the game. In the kind of game that gives your fan base like PTSD. I don't think you can overstate what he did on that last drive.
Yeah, so do you know how many passes he actually completed on that drive?
It was only like 4 or 5, right?
It was 4. He only needed 4 passes on that drive for Nebraska to go down and basically score starting from their own 19. And it starts, and you're right, like it was weird. Nebraska, as always, things get weird. So there's 3:42 left in the game. Nebraska takes over at the 19-yard line. Very first play, it's him sort of being flushed to the left and then looking back to the right and just kind of chuck something over there to a wide open Luke Lindenmeyer, who then catches it. He he basically shoves a Maryland Terrapin attempted tackle into the ground with just one of the better stiff arms you're going to see all year. Picks up, what did he pick up on that? Looked like 23 yards. Come back the very next play. And speaking again to your weirdness, because the first one didn't look like a normal play. This time, Isaiah Hunter is just busting off the line wide open, like wide open. And inexplicably, like Dylan Raiola no longer has his feet under him. He's like falling backwards. Like, I don't know if he slipped on an imaginary banana peel.
Oh, that play. Yes.
I don't know.
He just goes down.
I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, he's like flailing and just tosses. It wasn't like a perfect pass, but it is exactly where it needed to be for a wide open Isaiah Hunter. And Nebraska at this point, which had already gotten from the 19 to the 42, gets a 33-yard gain on 2nd and 5 as, again, Dylan Raiola slips and is falling and just throws this thing. And they're completely in business at this point. And then they do the right thing. They slow it down. You know, they're at the Maryland 16 yard line at that point. Or, yeah, they're right around in that area. And they slow this game down. They run the football a little bit. They're getting down there. And then we get the Heinrich Haarberg play, which you mentioned, and I have no argument here that it's the greatest play of his tight end career. I would maybe argue it's the most impressive play of his college career, which this is a guy who's had a couple 70-yard touchdown runs as a quarterback and everything else. And he's had a couple nice blocks on some of his clear out blocks too. I can't believe he caught that ball. That thing was a rifle. First of all, Dylan Raiola put that in a window that didn't exist. Only Dylan Raiola saw that window, and he put it in there perfectly. Haarberg is pretty well covered going to the sidelines as a converted backup quarterback that's now playing tight end, and he catches this ball, tiptoes the sidelines, gets dragged down, and as someone on Twitter pointed out to me, and I remember seeing it and thinking the same thing, he has like this NFL veteran mindset of he's one-handing the ball as he catches it, going like Keenan Allen does this, like going down and he's showing the official as he's going, like, hey, I got it. I got this ball. Clearly caught it. We don't need to have any conversation about this. Never a doubt. My, giant hands and oven mitts brought this thing in safely. Let's just move the chains and move on. Just like that guy was a backup quarterback coming in against UCLA last year and went 2 of 9 in the game. Like that's what he was doing at this time a year ago, roughly. And now he's catching one of the bigger catches, moves the chain, sets Nebraska inside the 10-yard line, sets everything else up in motion. And they kind of had to have it there because that was a second down play. Otherwise, you get to third down. And, we've been here with Nebraska. They probably don't get the first down on third down. And then you got a 4th and short or a 4th and medium. And who knows what happens there. So just a tremendous play and an unbelievable throw. I would encourage everyone to just go look at that. BTN did show a nice angle of it. There was no window there. And Dylan Raiola got that ball inexplicably in a very tight place, and Haarberg caught it.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of the earlier play, I think their previous touchdown drive to Lindenmeyer, where Raiola,
he had a great catch.
Ran around and just found a spot to put it that only his guy could get it. And I think on Haarberg, it's easy to forget how crazy we spent a couple of years hearing how crazy athletic this guy was before he was even really a contributor. Like to go back all the way to 2023, Jeff Sims started the season as the starting quarterback, and they had packages for Haarberg, and Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield were saying, yeah, this guy's he's too athletic. We want to get him onto the court. So they had some, plays with him lined up like H-back and tight end, even back then when he was a quarterback. And he was a basketball player at Kearney Catholic. He does the football player dunk contest at the halftime PBA every year. Like, he's a super athletic dude. I think that sometimes gets lost in just his whole journey from quarterback to tight end and where he sits now. Yeah,
it's just a really impressive guy too, because it would have been easy for him to leave multiple different points in his career. Before you even arrived, he had an offensive coordinator who disliked him so much that he didn't even really allow him to be part of the quarterback room. So he had an entire year where he didn't get any development because Mark Whipple wasn't seeing it. So, Harburg, for him to stick it out, obviously he's a local in the sense that he's from the state, a local guy, and it didn't hurt that, he had other reasons to kind of stick around too, but still to stick it all out and put himself in that position. And they think he's an NFL tight end over there. I've said that a bunch of times. I had an off-season conversation with Marcus Satterfield, and he was, it's like trying to tell me that the best version of Heinrich Harburg as a tight end won't happen at Nebraska. We're going to be seeing it on Sundays for somebody in the NFL, and that's how strongly they feel about him. And I think they got a couple guys with him and Luke Lindenmeyer that it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you and I root for the same NFL team, and I've seen more than enough bad third-string tight ends there. I'd be more than happy to see a Luke Lindenmeyer or a Heinrich Harburg over a Johnny Munt ever again in my life. So
Johnny Munt.
Yeah, I was tired of that. So I think those guys have a real chance, and they showed it with those catches. Like, that's going to be, scouts are going to see that they have that ability to do that, let alone, with Lindenmeyer, who I think can really help you as an inline blocker as well. So Nebraska's down there. Were you at all surprised they didn't run the ball after that, at least maybe force a timeout from Maryland to get one of those timeouts? Maryland had 2 left. There's a minute or so left in this game, and Nebraska went with back-to-back pass plays. First one to Luke Lindenmeyer was kind of there. Raiola put it a little bit further. I love that play call. It's a little bit delayed, from the tight end, and then he just goes straight out over the middle, and the ball's just supposed to find him, right before the goal post so he can get his feet in there. It didn't quite work how Nebraska wanted. And then they just got the matchup they wanted. Dylan threw it up, and Dane Key came down with it, there to score the touchdown. Surprised at all they didn't run to try to get a timeout off the board with a minute and change. And really, you're 5 yards in to score. Like, the whole game is in that 5-yard stretch.
No, because I thought Raiola was kind of in a good spot. I thought he was in a rhythm, and I wouldn't have thought it made a lot of sense to take the ball out of his hands, especially with what we talked about at the beginning of this, their issues with running the ball in short yardage situations. And I also think it just, you're Nebraska. You've been in this position and come up empty a lot, like in the past 5 to 10 years. You don't mess around there. You go score and you deal with it, and you force a freshman quarterback making his 6th career start to go 80 yards in 20 seconds and beat you. Yeah.
I mean, were you at all, because I know this is the case with Nebraska fans. I know this is the case with football fans in general. They scored. There's like a minute left on the clock. Did you think there was maybe enough time for Maryland to go do it based on what you had seen from Malik Washington all day?
I mean, I thought there was a chance, but not a very likely one. That's a super tough position to put a freshman quarterback into. I don't think that's like, was there a chance? Yes. I don't think that's like a realistic expectation of any freshman quarterback. And I thought Malik Washington played really well. I was impressed with him.
Very good. He's very, very good as a freshman already. I mean, even the pass he had after the intentional grounding that helped kind of set Nebraska up to win that game defensively there, where he's got Williams Nwaneri in his face, and he just drops that thing perfectly into his receiver, looked like a post there, and the receiver hanging on when he just a very, very nice, legal, not targeting hit from Deshaun. I was expecting that flag to come out
shoulder
right
to shoulder. That was
perfect, exactly as it's taught hit from Deshaun Singleton there. I thought all game Malik Washington looked outstanding. I mean, and that's going to be part of the conversation, I think, about Dylan Raiola moving forward is, hey, this other guy in Maryland is a freshman and looked like he was a more veteran, more savvy, better at what he was doing. And then the counter to that is Nebraska won the football game, and Dylan Raiola drove the field and 81 yards and put Nebraska up, for good in that game. So that'll be, I know how things go around here. That it's going to be a real conversation. But yeah, Malik Washington looked outstanding. Nebraska's defense gave up, I think, just 1 first down there. And then the intentional grounding happened, and they were able to get off the field. What do you think of the defense overall? Maryland doubled up the running yards they have been getting in Big Ten play as they took on Nebraska this weekend. It felt like Nebraska didn't get much, if any, pressure outside of the Cade Peters sack early in the game on a run pass option that he diagnosed correctly. What did you think of the defensive performance in this?
I thought it was about what we've come to expect from Nebraska, which is there are some good moments and some moments that it starts to tailspin on them. And we've seen that, and it kind of compounds play over play. This team's kryptonite seems to be the big play. When guys break off a run for 20, 30 yards. We saw it against Michigan. I thought you could chalk some of that up to just, that's a veteran big boy O line that can move dudes out of the way. But we saw more of it against Maryland. And, I think that's one of the things that, puts a ceiling on this team unless they get it figured out, is when a team can go for 20 yards on you on a given play. That's going to narrow your path to victory. That's going to, I said, just put the ceiling on you. And part of what I'm interested in seeing over the last 6 games of the season.
Yeah. I said this after the Michigan game. I'm saying it after the Maryland one. I understand that the conventional thing is, Nebraska's defensive line needs to be better. I still think, I definitely think from the Michigan game, but I also felt with Maryland too, like, yeah, the defensive line could do more. The second and third level are the bigger issues to me with Nebraska's inconsistency in stopping the run. I mean, Maryland made it apparent they were going to run to the side of the field that Rex Guthrie was on, in terms of run fits, and he struggled. And the same thing happened with Mario Buford. Nebraska's got to find an answer at safety opposite of Deshaun Singleton, because teams have kind of identified, like, we can go in that direction. And when Vincent Shavers was out, it looked kind of scary for Nebraska's linebacker situation, because they just, as someone who thought Marquise Watson-Trent was going to seamlessly come over from the Sun Belt and play a large role this season, he's struggled. He's just not athletically gifted enough for this conference, as unfortunate as that is to say. I mean, he can make tackles right in front of him. He can help in that regard, but he can't turn and run in space. And if teams are able to get outside the tackle, that's a lot of space that they've found, Maryland found, just on simple stuff. And that is kind of the area, and that's what looked different against Michigan State. I thought they looked really good swarming. I thought the second and third level looked really good in the run fits. And then against Maryland, it felt like it was more of a breakdown. And then Maryland's offensive line is just good. I honestly, if Malik Washington was the most impressive thing about Maryland, the second most impressive thing is that offensive line gave him all day to throw, which you could say is partly on Nebraska. They didn't bring a ton of pressure, but they also moved people. And they didn't really do that all year against anybody else running the football, but they certainly did it when it mattered against Nebraska. And I left impressed by the line, and again, concerned about Nebraska's run fits on the second and third level, especially when you've got Minnesota, Northwestern, I think USC, UCLA, Penn State, Iowa, all of these teams, the back half of your schedule, all 6 of these teams can just pound it away at you and are more than willing to run the same play over. And Maryland did that. They just ran power on Nebraska at one point in time, over and over and over. And so I am fascinated how John Butler will kind of choose to attack that. Jumping over to the third phase here, I've enjoyed asking my guests this year on the Sunday side session their general thoughts on just the transformation that special teams has made in just a singular year. You got to witness all of 2024's special teams, and it's, I guess we'll say, glory. What do you think about a team where, like the week before they block a punt, they do all this other stuff, and then this week against Maryland, you get Kenneth Williams nearly housing a kick return in a critical moment for Nebraska?
It's strange to watch Nebraska play, and when the other team's kicker or punter comes out, you say, like, oh, something could happen. Ja'Cory Barney making a guy miss and getting into space is one of the most, like, exciting things that you can see. It's kind of breathtaking when he gets into a spot where you say, oh, he could take this. And I don't think we're going to see him return one for a touchdown at some point this season. I mean, he did, and it got called back against Michigan State. against Michigan State, but that's just one of the more exciting plays that Nebraska has in a given game. And then, yeah, Kenneth Williams, Lincoln high zone.
Yeah.
That was another huge play to kind of shift the momentum back to Nebraska after Maryland had scored. The momentum went back and forth about 17 more times by the end of the third quarter, but it really has been something. I don't think you can give Mike Eckler enough credit for what he's done to turn a just glaring nightmare disaster of a weakness in 2024 into a thing that wins them football games.
Yeah, you can go pretty deep in the thesaurus coming up with words for bad, to represent what Nebraska's special teams was. And then you can go the other way and discussing how quickly it has switched and become a strength and arguably maybe the strongest part of this whole team because it sets Nebraska up in so many ways. I mean, it set them up for points. They didn't take them last week. They scored literal points against Michigan State. They set Nebraska up for points again. It gives you just an incredible high floor in every football game, and it's just remarkable how quickly that has turned around for him. I got a few more things I want to ask about, and so we'll start with an obvious one. Nebraska 5-1. I mentioned the 6-game stretch they have coming up, where you get the next 4 before the bye week, and those being Minnesota on Friday, and then they come back home. They get Northwestern. They have the big home game against USC, and then they head out onto the road to UCLA before the bye week. How are you feeling about this Nebraska football team as they go into this stretch? And what are you thinking of these other programs? I'm sure you had an eye on what the Gophers did yesterday against Purdue. Northwestern with a big win against Penn State. I understand there's a lot going on with that Penn State program, but it's impressive to me that Northwestern showed up and won that game and out-toughed a Nittany Lion team. USC had a monster win, and UCLA had a monster win. So how are you feeling about this next stretch of 4 for Nebraska?
I think it'll be telling. I think, Minnesota reminds me a lot of Nebraska, especially just last night against Purdue, where you're watching, and it was kind of like Nebraska against Michigan State. Not quite as weird, but like it felt like they didn't quite, take care of business like they should have, against an inferior team. I am looking forward to that game next week because, look, as a Minnesotan, I did not know until I got here how much like Nebraska fans hate PJ Fleck. And it makes for just, look, I wanted Minnesota to win last night because I want as much juice going into that game as possible. I want the stakes as high just from an entertainment perspective as they can be for Nebraska, Minnesota on a Friday night. But I think as they play these running teams, that will be Minnesota being one of them, but that will be the biggest test they face all season. They've got 6 games left. I think the book is kind of out that like this is what teams are going to try to do to Nebraska. Can they handle it? And these are a lot of teams that this is their strength, especially Minnesota. You think Iowa at the end of the season, that inevitably gets weird for better or worse. How are they going to handle teams as the weather gets colder, teams just playing old school Big Ten football and trying to run the ball down their throats?
Yeah, this Minnesota team is super, super weird to me in that I think Drake Lindsey is kind of an exciting quarterback, which you don't really say about Minnesota a lot. He didn't have a great game last night. It was 21-45, but I think he's better than certainly some of the guys we've seen Minnesota roll out there and have success against Nebraska. But here's where it gets weird. I mean, they were 18 for 30 yards against Purdue last night running the football. Like, that is not the Minnesota that I anticipate. And then you flip it to the other side. Do you know how many yards Purdue ran for in that game?
Quite a few.
253 yards. I don't know that has happened at any other point in the PJ Fleck era in a Big Ten game, unless you're playing like one of the elite programs. Like, that is a lot of yardage for Minnesota, which is a pretty prideful defense for the most part under Fleck. to allowing. So then that should kind of tell you like, hey, there might be an opportunity for Emmett Johnson to have a big game on Friday. Is Minnesota in position to just run the football? Their long yesterday was 9. And I think Purdue has played better defensively. Certainly Barry Odom, that's his calling card as a coach, prior to being a head coach, is being a defensive coordinator. But just kind of not the Minnesota that you would expect. But I think this game, and it's kind of been my circled game all year, where it's like Nebraska can take a big step forward, not just win a football game, but kind of just take a big step forward for who they want to be if they can go into Minneapolis on a short week and actually win a football game against a program that has kind of owned them, quite frankly, since 2018. And, they had the opportunity in Matt Rule's first game in 2023, and he kind of looked shell-shocked after that game by the reaction that seemed to exist about how, oh, here we go again. It was the first game of his career, and Nebraska loses, on a last-second touchdown. I'm assuming you were at that one?
I was. Yeah, that was the first Nebraska game I covered. Yeah.
I thought so. And you're in your home state. You're watching a program that I'm sure you grew up watching, and then you have a Nebraska team, and you probably weren't at that point as well versed in the misanthropic, woe is me nature of Nebraska football. And then you got the crash course in all of that in one night.
Yeah, it's funny. Like
you and Matt Rule the same.
Yeah. Every Minnesota Nebraska game. Look, I will not be there on Friday because Nebraska basketball has
they play Saturday morning. Yeah.
BYU exhibition, and that's probably better if you're a Nebraska fan, because like every Nebraska Minnesota game, with maybe one exception, has been a just like disastrous loss for Nebraska, because there's that game. If you remember, last year was the Brennan Rigsby game for basketball. The year before that, Nebraska blew a 19-point lead at the Barn. Like, if I am there and
very aware of that one,
and Nebraska plays Minnesota, it seems to always end in disaster for Nebraska.
So you've been identified as a problem? Is that what you're saying here?
I mean, not publicly. I maybe shouldn't have said that, because now people will know and they're going to try to keep me away from these things.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, if Nebraska can go down and score a last-second touchdown for the first time in 8 seasons, I think there's belief that they can win a game if you're in attendance as well in the state of Minnesota. Though, who knows? If you're saying you're not going to be there, we can't test this theory right away.
Yeah,
yeah. So there is that. Yeah, this is a big one coming up here. I do want, since you're on here and you were just there in Chicago, I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little Nebraska basketball. What'd you think of being there at Media Days? What do you think of this team? I mean, you're going to see more of them in what is really actually a fun matchup with BYU next Saturday. What do you think of this team that Fred Hoiberg has assembled?
I think this team, at least on paper, fits into Fred Hoiberg's desired offense and style of play a lot better than last season. We saw at times last year they could hang with teams, I think especially back to like Creighton or UCLA. Like, they could hang with teams from a toughness perspective, but when this offense is at its best, which we saw quite often the year before that, it's when they have 4 to 5 guys who can shoot threes on the floor at a time and can just stretch out defenses, play space and pace. And I think this team is a lot better suited to do that. Obviously, getting Rink Mast back is huge, but just everyone they added in the portal, they didn't add anyone who's not at least a capable shooter. And I think we're going to see him get back to that identity of 2 years ago of launch threes, and on the right night, they can just run a team out of the gym. In terms of media days, the biggest thing was Mast spoke for the first time in about 18 months. The last time he talked to reporters was in the locker room after Texas A&M in Memphis. So that was just, great to catch up with him, learn what he's been up to for the past 18 months. He's always a very candid, mature guy. So that was just great to hear from him and just his journey, which has not been easy. So just overall, got me back into basketball mode, which is the best kind of mode for me.
All right. Oh, that's good to hear. Am I an idiot if I just want to believe that Nebraska is going to get like the non-injured or the better version of Rink Mass, the one that just came out and blitzkrieged Ohio State at home in 2024? I think it was a February game where he just
Yeah.
hit all those threes. Am I an idiot if I just believe he can just come right back and be that guy right away? Because for the sake of Nebraska being as interesting as possible, if he's that guy immediately, it could be a fun season in Lincoln.
Yeah. I think I've said this before, part of even if Mass doesn't have all of his like explosiveness back in that knee, he can still be 90% of that guy because that's just, his game was never based on like crazy athleticism. It's his shooting ability, it's his ability to
It's a passing.
yeah, and yeah, I was gonna say, and his just his headiness, ability to initiate offense as a big man. So I think if he comes back with his full basketball IQ, he can absolutely still be that guy. He said on Thursday, when he shot for the first time, he was surprised that that seemed to come back fairly quickly. The part that didn't come back right away was just the timing and the rhythm of playing with other people, and that's just a matter of reps.
Especially when you think about the wholesale change of who's going to be on the roster. I guess Jamarcus Lawrence will look familiar, but other than that, it's going to be a different group of guys around him. From when
Yeah.
he left and couldn't play last year to now. So that'll be fun to watch, and everyone can check out your coverage with the Omaha World Herald. Wilson Moore joining us here on the Sunday side session. Where else can people find your great coverage and your sports takes?
Yeah, omaha.com. It's easy enough to remember. And you can find me on Twitter at willsmore with an underscore at the end. I tweet out everything I write there.
All right. We appreciate and I don't know who we is, me, whoever's randomly lurking in the background here. Appreciate your time joining us here on the Sunday side session. Everybody else, check out what we have going on at Husker247.com. BC was out there in Maryland for us, providing great coverage as always. And so we've got plenty of stuff from the game. We're going to have plenty of stuff coming out of the game leading up to Minnesota. There's certainly some recruiting things going on. As Wilson mentioned, basketball is coming back. I know Brunts has been sending me texts about fall baseball and what's going on there. So all that kind of coverage can be found at Husker247.com. So be sure to check that out. Check out what we got going on with Husker 24/7 daily every weekday, 10 a.m. on YouTube. You can also get it wherever you get your podcasts. So for Wilson Moore, I'm Mike Schaefer. We appreciate your time. We'll catch you next time.